Hi, Jim Van Zant, one of the pastors, Carlisle United Methodist Church, Sermon in 3 Minutes. Thanks for tuning in. This summer, we've been doing a series on that ancient creed called the Apostles' Creed, which lifts up some of the basic tenets of what we believe as Christians. We understand that the creed was written to combat heresy and misunderstandings of the day about the Christian faith. And last week's phrase that we looked at was that phrase that we believe in the forgiveness of sins. Now, that's interesting in and of itself. As Christians, we do believe in the forgiveness of sins, and one might think, why would you have to write that? Well, it's because at the time the creed was written, that was somewhat in contention. Not the forgiveness part, but when the sins were forgiven. See, there had always been a pendulum kind of swinging left and right, not only in culture, but also in the church. When the church first gets formed with the Apostle Paul, of course, he preaches Jesus and the grace and the mercy and all that Jesus talked about what God is really like, and set up many churches. However, there seemed to be some misunderstandings, and some of the churches had the idea, the leadership had the idea, that in order to protect the integrity of the church, they needed to watch over the membership and point out sins and then exclude people from the church in order to protect the church's integrity. So the pendulum swung pretty far to the right and fairly strict about that in a misguided effort. The pendulum does swing back the other way and causes Paul once again to write that phrase, we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, because the bigger problem in the church were former pagans coming into the church, bringing their former life behaviors into the church and expecting the church to accept that as part of its grace, and we know that that was an abuse of the grace of God. We would think things might have found its natural center, but they didn't. After the New Testament, there's a set of writings from who we call the Apostolic Fathers, like Polycarp and Irenaeus, and names such as that you may or may not be familiar with. But their writings, they believed in the great wideness of God's mercy and grace prior to baptism. But after baptism, not so much grace. Now you know better. Caused some to even write that if you didn't live a spiritual, disciplined life of obedience, you had no business being in the church. And so it's against that background that this phrase is written. We believe in the forgiveness of sins after baptism. That was the key part of understanding this. Even after baptism, you can be forgiven of sin. Prior to that, there was an understanding that's not very sure. So you can see why it's an important phrase to put in the creed. You know, one of the things we always believe in and what Jesus preached, it isn't about sin. He talked about the grace and mercy and understanding of God. Most of us have an inadequate view of who God really is, and that's caused many of us to live our lives with shame and guilt when we really didn't need to, particularly if we come with a penitent heart and truly want to change. The creed really states, and we as Christians believe, we believe in a God of new starts, of brand new beginnings. No matter when, no matter who you are, no matter when the waywardness happens, there is at no time are you ever outside the grace and mercy of God, a God who gives new starts. Think about those moments in your life when maybe you needed a new start and how gracious God was to you. And remember that even when we're going to be waywardness after this video, we believe in the God of new starts. Give God thanks today for the new starts He's given you in your life. Thanks for turning in Sermon in 3 Minutes.